imagine waking up one morning, just grabbing your phone to buy a coffee, and you find out your bank account is totally frozen.
Right, like a literal nightmare scenario.
Exactly, but not because you overdrafted or because of identity theft, but because some algorithm at the central bank flagged an audiobook you bought the night before as a, quote, hate transaction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And according to the author of the incredibly provocative, ultra-long, and honestly just fascinating new ebook we're diving into today, this isn't some dystopian science fiction scenario.
No, he thinks it's happening right now.
Right. He argues it is the opening salvo in a coordinated modern apocalypse. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking Understanding the Apocalypse, a rational guide to revelation and archetypes by Conrad Riker.
It is a massive text, both in page count and honestly, just the sheer scope of its ambition.
It really is. And right up front, I want to ask you, the listener, to please like and subscribe to the show because we are navigating some incredibly intense, deep waters today.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you want to follow along with the source material, or, if this hooks you and you want to buy the book right now, check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's available on both platforms. You should also follow the author directly on Substack at Conrad and Riker.
Yeah. To really grasp what Riker is doing here, we have to establish exactly who this book is fundamentally written for.
Right, because this isn't for everyone.
No, not at all. This is not a generalized self-help book. It is explicitly tailored for a men's rights activist audience. It's basically written as a manifesto for red-pilled manosphere men.
Okay, so a very specific demographic.
Exactly. Riker's stated mission is to help his readers understand the history of our modern institutions.
Right.
The workplace, marriage, academia, banking.
Right.
And he wants to argue that these institutions once functioned as like engines of civilization before, in his view, anyway, being entirely captured by feminists and Marxists.
And because of that specific target audience and the intensely charged nature of the claims the author makes, we definitely need to issue a crucial disclaimer before we get into the weeds here.
Good call.
This text is highly, highly politically charged. So, to you listening, we are not taking sides here.
Oh.
Right. We are not endorsing the viewpoints, whether left-wing or right-wing, contained in this book. Our mission is simply to impartially report, unpack, and analyze the ideas and the architectural arguments exactly as they are presented by Conrad Riker in the original text.
We're basically your objective tour guides through a very controversial, heavily defended landscape.
Perfectly said. We are just examining the structural integrity of his ideology, right? To understand why it's resonating so deeply with a specific demographic of men.
Yeah, and the entry point to this worldview requires completely redefining the word apocalypse.
Because he's not talking about the end of the world, right?
No, Riker explicitly rejects that cinematic biblical imagery of like fire raining from the sky.
Yeah.
He defines the apocalypse as a slow motion, intentional collapse of traditional masculinity happening right now.
A collapse of masculinity.
Yeah, he literally maps the four horsemen conquest, war, famine, and death onto modern cultural phenomena.
What are his four horsemen?
He says they are wokeism, divorce courts, central bank digital currencies,
Right.
and what he refers to as the soy diet.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's start with that first pillar, what he calls the crisis of modern manhood.
Right.
Because he looks at society today and describes it, frankly, as a dumpster fire that actively pathologizes male instincts. And he brings some very heavy statistics to bear here.
He really does.
He points out that 93% of all workplace deaths are men.
93%.
Yeah. And he cites studies showing sperm counts have plummeted by 50% since 1973. Plus, he highlights this survey where 70% of young men report feeling that society fundamentally despises them.
It's a bleak picture he's painting.
It is, but what is the mechanism connecting, a workplace death statistic to a feeling of societal hatred?
Well, Riker is weaving these disparate data points into this singular narrative of disposability.
Okay, disposability.
Yeah. He's arguing that society demands the ultimate physical sacrifices from men. Like they are the ones falling off scaffolding, working the oil rigs, maintaining the sewers.
Right, the dirty, dangerous job.
Exactly. While simultaneously, he argues, culturally degrading the very traits that allow them to do those jobs. He views men as the, quote, disposable sex in a gynocratic dystopia.
Dinocratic dystopia, that is a heavy phrase.
Very heavy. And the mechanism he uses to explain this is evolutionary psychology. Riker asserts that the biological wiring that kept the human species alive through ice ages and, predators is now being treated by modern culture as a disease to be cured.
He leans so hard into that evolutionary blueprint. I mean, he argues men are biologically wired for chaos and stress.
Oh, absolutely.
He cites this 2023 UCLA study claiming that men's spatial reasoning actually jumps by 22% under high-stress conditions.
Which is fascinating.
It is. And then he brings in Army Ranger training data, noting that men who engage in deliberate, brutal physical hardship produce 23% more vasopressin.
Now, vasopressin is interesting because it's usually associated with pair bonding.
Right. But Riker frames it completely differently. He calls it the crisis leadership hormone.
Ah, okay.
He says it narrows focus, manages fear, and primes a man to protect.
And that framing is essential to his thesis. When mainstream culture talks about toxic masculinity, Riker sees a deliberate feminist trap.
A trap designed to do what?
Designed to neuter those exact biological imperatives. He argues that the actions of our hunter-gatherer ancestors tracking prey, spearing mammoths, surviving extreme weather, rely on the exact same biological hardware that a modern man needs to dominate a high-stakes environment.
So he's saying you can't separate the two.
Exactly. He points to a Journal of Applied Psychology study showing male leaders average 15% higher testosterone levels than their staff. In Riker's view, you simply cannot separate the hormone from the leadership capability.
He paints a very vivid picture of this with a story about his father.
Oh, the IKEA story.
Yes. He describes his dad assembling IKEA furniture, specifically these massive Malm dressers. But he isn't doing it on, like, a lazy Sunday afternoon.
No, the power is out, right?
Exactly. It's dark. He's doing it by candlelight, sweating, grinding his knuckles with a tiny Allen wrench, and smiling the entire time.
Smiling through the pain.
Yeah. Riker's dad says, quote, "This is what male brains evolved to do." And Riker compares that tangible physical problem solving in the dark to the modern corporate office.
And the modern office, according to Riker, is an evolutionary dead zone.
A dead zone.
Yeah. He claims it replaces primal survival instincts with HR checklists, sensitivity training modules, and demands for emotional vulnerability.
Right.
He argues that forcing men into these sterile, emotionally driven environments is essentially biological malpractice.
Biological malpractice. That's quite the term.
He says the office requires a man to suppress his vasopressin and testosterone just to fit into a cooperative, non-hierarchical structure. And he believes this is what drives men to depression and listlessness.
You know, reading that section, I couldn't help but think of a high-performance sports car.
Okay, how so?
You have this engine built for speed, aggression, and tearing up treacherous terrain, right? And you permanently lock it in a school zone.
Oh, I see.
The engine wants to rev, it's designed to perform, but the environment dictates it goes 15 miles per hour and stops at every single crosswalk.
That's a great analogy for his argument.
But let's pause and challenge the text here for a second. Is society actually trying to intentionally erase masculinity, as Riker claims, in some coordinated attack? Or is he confusing the natural, messy evolution of a post-industrial, service-based economy with a targeted conspiracy?
That's the big question.
Right. Because maybe the school zone wasn't built to punish the sports car. Maybe it was just built to protect the kids crossing the street.
That is the fundamental divide in how we interpret sociological shifts. The alternative view you bring up suggests that as we moved away from an agrarian and industrial economy into a knowledge economy, raw physical strength and aggressive risk-taking simply became less economically functional.
Right. The environment just changed naturally.
Exactly. But Riker absolutely rejects that passive interpretation.
He doesn't buy it.
Not at all. He sees intentionality. He sees a system engineered by specific actors to suppress male power because male power is a threat to their control.
Okay, so if a listener accepts Riker's premise that the corporate workplace is a trap designed to suppress them, the natural next question is, where do they turn for fulfillment?
Historically, the answer was family.
Right. But Riker argues that the domestic sphere is an even more dangerous trap,
Oh, yeah?
which introduces his concept of the marriage strike and what he violently terms uterus uberization.
Yeah, he views modern marriage and the family court system not as social institutions, but as a rigged casino.
A rigged casino.
He characterizes divorce courts as a Marxist redistribution scheme where men function as indentured servants. And he doesn't just make the philosophical claim, he backs it up with his interpretation of legal data.
Right. He points out that 90% of alimony payers are men.
Yep.
He cites Harvard law researchers claiming men lose 65% of their assets in a divorce compared to women losing 28%.
That's a huge gap.
It is. And facing those numbers, the book strongly advocates for the MGTOW philosophy, men going their own way.
Right.
And here is a wild rhetorical swing. I couldn't believe this part. He cites Jesus of Nazareth as the original MGTOW.
It is a stunning historical reframing, isn't it?
I mean, Jesus, really?
Yeah, Riker argues that Jesus avoided marriage and localized domestic duties entirely because he needed to focus on a massive cosmic mission. He posits that having a wife, or, the potential of paying alimony, would have distracted Jesus from building the most enduring movement in Western civilization.
So he's using Jesus as the ultimate justification for staying single.
Exactly. By making this comparison, Riker is elevating the rejection of modern marriage. He's saying to his readers, you aren't failing at dating. You are walking a divine, historically validated path of high purpose.
And he juxtaposes this high-purpose male solitude with his critique of modern feminism.
Right, the uterus uberization concept.
Yeah. He claims feminism executed a massive bait and switch, tricking women into prioritizing corporate careers over family building.
He highlights the fact that major tech corporations literally offer to freeze their female employees' eggs.
Yeah, he says they're treating female fertility like, quote, stashing vintage wine just so the corporation can extract 80-hour work weeks out of them during their prime childbearing years.
And he traces the macro-demographic consequences of this shift. He points to South Korea, where the fertility rate has plummeted to 0.78.
Which is incredibly low.
It's disastrous. He notes that a civilization needs a 2.1 rate just to maintain its current population.
Right.
And then he brings in CDC data, claiming that 40% of urban progressive households now have more pet iguanas or cats than actual children.
Iguanas.
That's what he says. The imagery he uses is visceral. He talks about a grandmother's heirloom mahogany crib being converted into a bed for a rescue labradoodle.
Oh, wow.
He paints a picture of a society breeding itself into extinction because it traded biological legacy for corporate milestones.
So because of this landscape, he says modern dating isn't courtship anymore. He calls it a forensic audit.
A forensic audit.
Yeah, and he shares the story of a 35-year-old engineer named Mike.
Right, the guy on the boat.
Exactly. Mike looked at the statistical probabilities of divorce, the financial risks of alimony, decided the math was a terrible deal, and opted out completely.
He just walked away.
Traded dating for living on a tax-free boat in international waters, escaping closed ledgers and family courts entirely.
Mike is presented as the ultimate rational execution of the MGTOW philosophy, an absolute economic and physical secession.
And then Riker follows this up with a personal anecdote from a Tinder date, right?
Oh, the credit score story.
Yeah. He claims a woman sat down and almost immediately asked him about his credit score.
Just right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. And in response, he asked for her BMI, her body mass index.
Ouch.
Yeah, he says she unmatched him before the drinks even arrived.
I can imagine.
His justification is that if women are culturally empowered to appraise men as financial utilities, men must ruthlessly appraise women on sheer biological and reproductive terms.
It's very transactional.
It is. But here is a glaring paradox we really have to address.
Let's hear it.
Riker spends hundreds of pages obsessing over building a legacy, siring dynasties, and acting like our conquering ancestors.
Right.
Yet his immediate actionable solution is to completely opt out of the reproductive and marital systems. He's telling men to buy a boat and sail away.
It's a huge contradiction.
How does a society of alpha men survive past a single generation if they are all on a marriage strike? You cannot build a multi-generational dynasty with a tax-free boat and zero heirs.
It is the central tension of his ideology. There is a profound contradiction between his reverence for patriarchal legacy and his advice to abandon the institution required to build it.
Yeah.
But reading between the lines, Riker seems to view this strike as a siege tactic.
A siege tactic.
Yeah, he believes the current system is so deeply corrupted it cannot be reformed from within. Therefore, men must starve the marriage plantation of their capital, their protection, and their utility.
Okay.
He is advocating for accelerating the demographic collapse, betting that from the ashes, men can rebuild marriage on strictly patriarchal terms.
Okay, but nature abhors a vacuum. If millions of men are pulling their time, money, and biological drive out of traditional relationships, where does that energy go?
Riker's answer is deeply cynical.
He argues this energy is being siphoned off into what he calls the beta apocalypse and the digital matrix.
Having diagnosed the legal traps of marriage, he pivots to the digital and chemical pacification of the modern man.
Chemical pacification.
Well, let's start with the digital. He cites NIH data stating that 34% of men under 30 haven't had sex in the past year.
Right.
Now, mainstream sociology usually frames this as a tragic epidemic of male loneliness and social isolation.
Sure, that's what you usually hear.
Riker entirely inverts that narrative. He frames it as a, quote, renaissance of rational male choice.
He actually compares these young men ignoring dating apps to medieval monks.
Medieval monks.
Yeah. He says they're like the monks who locked themselves away to preserve Aristotle's texts, while barbarians burned the cities outside.
Wow. That's quite the image.
But he draws a sharp distinction between the men opting out safely and the men falling victim to what he calls cuckoldry by proxy.
This concept is crucial to understanding his view of the internet. Riker theorizes that beta males are outsourcing their biological drive to provide and protect.
How are they outsourcing it?
He points to platforms like OnlyFans and Twitch. He claims that 70% of the top 1% of earners on OnlyFans are bankrolled primarily by men working minimum wage, high labor jobs.
70%.
That's his claim.
No.
He views this as a catastrophic tragedy of misdirected male energy. Instead of building their own physical empires or improving their own lives, these men are draining their limited resources to fund the luxurious lifestyles of digital content creators.
And the online chads, those creators actually date.
Exactly.
He claims the average simp, his term, not mine, spends over $200 a month on strangers online.
$100.
Yeah, money that could be compounding in investments or, paying for martial arts training. And he ties this digital pacification directly to chemical pacification. We have to talk about the soy conspiracy.
Oh, yes. The soy conspiracy.
Riker claims that modern, highly processed diets, specifically those heavily reliant on soy, are actively lowering male testosterone. He cites a study showing soy lowers rat testosterone by 15%.
And his prescribed antidote to this chemical warfare is the carnivore cure.
The carnivore cure.
He points to a 2023 Journal of Culinary Endocrinology study asserting that men who grill red meat see a testosterone spike of 17% compared to those eating plant-based diets.
17% just from grilling.
Well, we need to look at the mechanism here. Riker isn't just talking about the nutritional density of protein. He's talking about the evolutionary psychology of fire and animal fat.
Right, he fuses diet, digital consumption, and masculinity into one survival strategy. He equates mindlessly scrolling TikTok or swiping on Tinder to a literal theft of a man's primal purpose.
A theft.
Yeah. He cites a Stanford study finding that getting a match on a dating app triggers the exact same dopamine pathway as hitting a slot machine in Vegas.
It's unearned reward.
Exactly. And he tells the story of John, a 32-year-old programmer who was deeply addicted to his Xbox and online pornography.
And what did John do?
John adopted Riker's protocol. He traded the screens for heavyweight lifting and studying copywriting. And supposedly, he increased his income by $12,000 in a single year.
It is a promise of alchemical transformation, really, turning wasted digital dopamine into real-world capital.
Yeah.
He uses another story about a neighbor named Dave.
Oh, Dave and his son.
Right. Dave's teenage son was lost in virtual worlds, totally addicted to gaming. Rather than taking him to a therapist, Dave instituted stake and solve nights.
Stake and solve.
He dragged his son into the backyard, threw a raw ribeye over a propane grill, and forced him to manage the open flame while debating philosophy and life goals.
So no screens, just fire and meat.
Exactly. Riker uses this to argue that nothing rewires a fractured male psyche faster than open flames, animal fat, and fatherly presence.
You know, the analogy that screams out to me here is the lotus eaters from the Odyssey.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Odysseus' men land on this island, eat the lotus flowers, and instantly lose all desire to return home, to fight, or to achieve anything difficult. They just want to sit in a drug-induced apathy and consume.
And Riker is essentially arguing that Silicon Valley is farming digital lotus flowers.
Exactly. But here's where I push back.
Okay.
Are men truly helpless victims of a digital gelding coordinated by tech CEOs? Or is it simply infinitely easier for a man to blame an algorithm than to look in the mirror, take personal accountability, and put the phone down?
That's fair.
I mean, no one is physically forcing you to open the app.
That cuts to the core of the debate regarding technology and human agency. Riker leans heavily into the argument that these platforms are weaponized.
So weaponized.
Yes. They are engineered using billions of dollars of behavioral psychology research specifically to exploit human vulnerabilities. He argues that expecting an isolated average man to out-willpower an algorithm designed by 1,000 PhDs is a rigged fight.
Okay, I see that.
However, your counter-argument exposes a flaw in his logic. True stoicism, which Riker advocates for relentlessly in the next section, would dictate absolute ownership of your attention regardless of how aggressively addictive the environment is.
Which brings us to the counteroffensive. If the apps, the divorce courts, and the processed diets are the traps, how does a man fight back?
Right.
Riker proposes what he calls the red pill renaissance and the war on dissent.
Roker argues that the captured institutions, mainstream media, academia, corporate boards, are actively trying to silence the manosphere perspective.
But he says it's not working.
No, he claims this censorship is failing spectacularly due to a phenomenon he calls the persecution dividend.
The persecution dividend. He theorizes that when woke institutions ban or deplatform influencers, and he specifically names Andrew Tate and Rush for a fee, their ideas don't die.
They get stronger.
Right. The ban acts as a massive validation of their claims, leading to exponential spikes in their popularity.
It proves they are a threat.
Exactly. He brings up an Ohio high school football coach who was fired simply for quoting Andrew Tate about embracing male power.
And what happened to him?
Well, the result. The coach launched a Patreon, and within 3 months he was making triple his teaching salary by offering life advice to young men. The censorship literally made him a martyr and a millionaire.
Riker frames this using the concept of the thought police, drawing heavily on Orwell's 1984, and even goes back to the trial of Socrates in 399 BC.
Socrates.
Yeah, Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth, and Riker uses this to frame the modern manosphere not as a fringe internet subculture, but as a historically necessary intellectual underground.
That is a massive elevation.
He argues that if a system tries to ban an ideology, it proves the ideology has the power to dismantle the system. He views modern universities as the primary enforcers of this system, calling them linguistic sawmills and re-education camps.
Linguistic sawmills. I mean, it implies they are just endlessly grinding down words and meanings until nothing solid is left. He claims universities are churning out hundreds of thousands of useless degrees in things like queer plumbing theory, entirely disconnected from physical reality.
And he juxtaposes that.
Yeah, he sharply juxtaposes that academic abstraction with the fact that 94% of actual welders, the people physically holding the bridges and buildings together, are men.
He is drawing an absolute hard line between the manipulation of language, which he categorizes as a beta bureaucratic trait,
Okay.
and the manipulation of physical reality, which he sees as the ultimate alpha trait.
So to survive an environment that rewards linguistic manipulation?
He advocates for beta proofing, a return to rigid ancient stoicism, and treating the gym as a literal religious temple. He graphs this on what he calls the Sigma spectrum.
The Sigma spectrum.
On the far left, you have beta bureaucrats policing pronouns in an HR department. On the far right, you have unapologetic warlords building independent empires.
And he obviously demands his readers move toward that warlord end of the spectrum.
No, absolutely.
And the vehicle for that movement is deliberate physical hardship. He is obsessed with the idea that physical pain is the only path to mental resilience.
He talks about Viking raiders. Right.
Yeah, he talks about Viking raiders enduring frostbites so severe their toenails fuse to their leather boots.
Good Lord.
And he pulls data from the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, from 1944. The data allegedly showed that Allied troops who had previously suffered broken bones from farming, hunting, or roughhousing were 300% more likely to survive the carnage on the beaches of D-Day.
Because he believes physical comfort is a corrosive agent that rots the male spirit.
Right.
We see this manifested in the modern subcultures he praises, like the raw egg brotherhood in Silicon Valley.
The raw egg brotherhood.
Yeah, these are tech millionaires who reject modern conveniences to consume raw diets, lift massive weights, and embrace sun exposure.
It's all about hardship.
Yes. And he also tells a fascinating story about a divorced father in Texas navigating family court.
Oh, this one was wild.
Instead of hiring an expensive therapist to testify, or using standard legal arguments, this father stood before the judge and simply quoted Marcus Aurelius' Meditations.
Just quoted philosophy at the judge.
He demonstrated such terrifyingly calm, stoic emotional control in a highly volatile environment that he won 50% custody.
It's all about forging an impenetrable mental armor.
Exactly.
But looking at this red pill renaissance, it feels exactly like a pressure cooker to me.
How so?
The harder institutions clamp down on these ideas, the more they force them into these dark underground networks. And in the dark, they become more concentrated, more radical, and far more explosive.
Right.
My question for Riker is this. Does replacing the concept of a safe space with bare-knuckle aggressive dominance actually build a functional, sustainable society? Or does it just build a hostile one where everyone is constantly at war with their neighbor?
Well, Riker would likely argue that human history is constant war.
Constant war.
He believes the illusion of a peaceful, sustainable society is a temporary, fragile luxury bought and paid for by the extreme aggression of the men who built it.
Ah, I see.
In his view, removing that aggression doesn't lead to a progressive utopia. It leads inevitably to collapse. Therefore, cultivating bare-knuckle resilience isn't about starting a war. It is about preparing for the war he believes is already at our doorstep, as the current system rots from the inside.
Okay, so if that system is actively rotting and the institutions are completely captured, how does a man protect his wealth? Because Stoicism doesn't pay the mortgage.
No, it doesn't.
This brings us to a fascinating pivot in the book, Armageddon economics and post-collapse kingdoms.
This is where Riker's ideology transitions from mental preparation into hardcore, decentralized financial survivalism.
Yeah.
He warns of the impending arrival of the digital Antichrist.
Now, he isn't talking about a biblical demon here, right?
Oh, no.
He's talking about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies.
Yes. He believes that programmable, state-controlled digital fiat will be the ultimate tool of totalitarian oppression.
How does he think they'll use it?
He argues that CBDCs will be used to track every single variable of a man's life. His carbon footprint, his caloric intake, and most dangerously, his wrong think.
Wrong think.
He outlines a highly plausible near future where if you express a dissenting political opinion on a podcast or a forum, your ability to buy groceries, purchase plane tickets, or pay rent is instantly frozen by a central algorithm.
And he backs up this terror with a story about an Australian dad.
Oh, this is the one from the intro.
Exactly. According to the book, this father had his home raided by local authorities because his bank's digital tracker flagged a recent purchase.
And what was the dangerous contraband?
He bought an audiobook of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
You're kidding.
Nope. The algorithm allegedly categorized it as a hate transaction and triggered a police response.
Well, whether that specific anecdote is literal documented fact or an illustrative exaggeration of current banking trends, the underlying panic is very real within this demographic.
Oh, for sure.
Riker has a profound, historically grounded distrust of fiat currency. He traces his economic arguments back to the hyperinflation of Weimar Germany in 1923, where men literally traded family heirlooms for a single loaf of bread.
Right.
He connects that history to modern Federal Reserve policies, which he brilliantly brands as an inflationary vasectomy.
An inflationary vasectomy.
Yeah, a stealth tax that silently destroys male productivity by diluting the purchasing power of their labor hour by hour.
To survive this inflationary vasectomy, his strategy is the surplus skill stack.
The surplus skill stack.
Yeah, he is screaming at young men to stop getting degrees in marketing or communications and start acquiring manual physical skills that cannot be outsourced to AI or frozen by a central bank.
Oh.
Welding, off-grid plumbing, trauma medicine. And to store wealth, he advises buying tangible, physical assets. Land with water rights, lead and ammunition, and physical silver.
But he acknowledges we live in a digital age, so he also advocates becoming a dark web Ronin.
A dark web Ronin.
A masterless samurai navigating the digital underworld. This means communicating exclusively on encrypted apps like Signal, browsing via the Tor network, and storing wealth in decentralized cryptocurrencies.
Which ones does he like?
He specifically champions Monero because it is untraceable, and Bitcoin. He repeats the mantra that collapse creates kings.
Collapse creates kings.
When the fiat system finally implodes, those holding tangible assets and decentralized, unseizable money will become the new ruling class. He even claims men are evolutionarily wired for blockchain arbitrage, because tracking digital ledgers mimics the ancestral dopamine loop of tracking prey through a forest.
He really forces that evolutionary angle onto everything.
He really does.
He illustrates this post-collapse economy with some incredible, gritty stories, He talks about Bunker Bob.
Bunker Bob.
Yeah, a guy who, during the depths of the 2008 financial crash, traded a stockpile of 500 cans of Spam for a functional Ford F-150.
Stand for a truck.
Yep. And he mentions a 70-year-old rancher outside Houston who, after Hurricane Harvey decimated the local infrastructure, traded 3 AR-15 rifles for a milk cow and laying hens.
Just bartering.
No Venmo, no credit scores, no CBDCs, just cold steel calories and barter.
Those anecdotes are designed to ground his complex macroeconomic theories in muddy, tangible reality.
Right.
It is a stark reminder to the reader that when the power grid goes down, the digital zeros in your Vanguard retirement account mean absolutely nothing compared to his stockpile of calories and the means to defend them.
But hold on, let's look at the massive logical gap here.
Okay, what is it?
He is advising his readers to build an elaborate, high-tech economic panic room. But there's a glaring contradiction.
I'm listening.
If a true societal collapse happens, the exact kind of Mad Max grid-down wasteland where guys are trading Spam for pickup trucks, does a digital currency like Bitcoin or Monero have any value whatsoever?
Ah, I see where you're going.
If the power grid is destroyed, or the internet cables are severed, you cannot access your crypto wallet. How can you advocate for hoarding digital code on a thumb drive while simultaneously preparing for a physical reality where only bullets and beef matter?
That is a brilliant critique, and it exposes a major fracture within the survivalist community itself.
Right, because there's two sides to this.
You essentially have two warring factions. The digital gold camp that believes the internet infrastructure is decentralized enough to survive governmental collapse, and the beans and bullets camp that believes only physical goods will hold value.
And Riker is trying to play both sides.
Riker appears to be attempting a very risky straddle. He is advising men to hoard crypto to escape the banking system's surveillance now, while simultaneously hoarding ammo and silver for when the physical infrastructure collapses later.
So he's covering all his bases.
He is hedging his bets across different phases of the apocalypse.
Okay, so if a listener is fully on board, they've rejected corporate HR, they are lifting heavy weights, eating raw steak, stacking silver, and buying Bitcoin. How does Riker suggest they integrate this into a normal Tuesday?
Right, the practical application.
How do you operationalize this rebellion? That brings us to his final blueprint, the Brotherhood Code and reclaiming the throne.
Riker understands that motivation is fleeting. To survive what he views as a societal dumpster fire, men must impose a ruthless, unbending order on their daily lives.
Regimentation.
Regimentation is the only defense against chaos.
And he gets incredibly specific with actionable routines. He mandates what he calls patriarchal peak hours.
Peak hours.
He designates 6 to 8 a.m. and 7 to 9 p.m. as non-negotiable windows where fathers must imprint life lessons on their children. He claims neuroplasticity makes kids most receptive to male authority during these exact times.
Wow, he pairs this with the Sunday Manifesto.
What's that?
He demands men spend 1 hour every single Sunday in total isolation, planning their barbell progression for the week, executing their stock and crypto choices, and explicitly writing down which cultural distractions they will refuse to engage with.
That is very intense.
And he also introduces a wild concept called gladiator math.
Gladiator math is fascinating. He argues that standard education alienates young boys with abstract concepts.
Yeah.
So he tells fathers to teach their sons algebra and physics not through textbooks, but through combat statistics.
Yeah.
Calculating the trajectory and drop of a 5.56 bullet over 400 yards, or analyzing the force generation of an MMA fighter strike. He is tying intellectual development directly back to physical dominance and conflict.
But Riker knows an isolated family is vulnerable, so he heavily advocates for neo-tribalism.
Neo-tribalism.
He instructs men to form localized survival pods consisting of exactly 5 men. It's his magic number, and each man must bring 3 distinct practical skills to the pod. For example, one man brings welding, plumbing, and ham radio operation. Another brings trauma medicine, permaculture, and marksmanship.
So everyone has a specialized role.
Exactly. And the absolute unbreakable rule of the pod: 0 tolerance for simping.
Wait, what does that mean in this context?
If a member shows emotional weakness or prioritizes a toxic romantic relationship over the survival of the pod, he is immediately exiled.
Wow. This neo-tribalism is his ultimate answer to modern isolation. He synthesizes the core message of the book right here.
Mm-hmm.
The coming collapse is not a tragedy.
No, he says it's a gift.
Exactly. It is a gift. It is an evolutionary filter that will ruthlessly cull the weak the compliant and the state-dependent, leaving only hard men to rebuild.
And he frames this through his apocalypse triad.
The apocalypse triad.
No fathers leads to no discipline, which inevitably leads to no destiny. He places the entire burden of civilizational salvation squarely on the shoulders of unapologetic, rigid masculinity.
And he provides tactical advice for surviving the current world while secretly building this parallel one. He suggests the Costanza Protocol.
The Costanza Protocol.
Oh, yeah.
Like from Seinfeld.
Yes, for navigating woke corporate environments. If the HR department comes around looking for ideological compliance, he advises men to fake an intense, socially awkward obsession with something incredibly mundane,
Like what?
like Civil War reenactments or model trains. The goal is to become socially unappealing but legally untouchable, allowing the man to quietly extract his paycheck while avoiding any diversity or inclusion mandates.
It is literal corporate camouflage.
Hide in plain sight. And while you are hiding, he directs you to educate your mind with banned or dangerous literature,
He specifically highlights Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground and Darwin's Origin of Species.
which are interesting choices.
He claims these texts reveal the raw, brutal, unvarnished truth about human nature that modern progressive society is desperately trying to suppress.
He is providing a blueprint for a complete self-sustaining counterculture, a methodology for living in the modern world, extracting resources from it without ever being ideologically captured by it.
Right.
But I look at this Brotherhood code, at this complete physical and mental regimentation, and it mirrors an ancient Spartan gauche,
The training program.
the brutal, uncompromising training program for Spartan youth.
Oh.
It treats every single day like a combat deployment. And my final question is this. By isolating themselves into these rigid, hyper-masculine survival pods, by viewing every single corporate interaction as a hostile merger, by treating daily life as an active war zone,
Yeah.
don't these men risk losing the very humanity, the very capacity for joy and connection that civilization is supposed to provide? If you spend your entire life wearing heavy armor, eventually you forget how to feel the sun on your skin.
It is a profound question. Riker's counterargument would undoubtedly be that feeling the sun on your skin is a luxury you can only afford after the walls of the city are secure.
After the walls are secure.
He perceives the current culture as being under active, malicious siege. And during a siege, armor isn't a paranoid choice, it is a biological necessity.
Right.
He would argue that the humanity you are referring to has already been corrupted and weaponized by the institutions he despises, and that true, authentic human connection can only be rediscovered once the current system falls and men reclaim their ancestral thrones.
We have covered an immense, incredibly intense landscape today. We have waded deep into Conrad Riker's worldview in understanding the apocalypse.
It is a worldview that looks at the modern era and sees zero progress.
Zero.
Where mainstream society sees advancements in gender equality, digital connectivity, and corporate efficiency, Riker sees an active, coordinated war on the essence of men.
And his solution is a total, uncompromising counterattack.
Right.
A return to heavy metal, raw meat, decentralized crypto, tangible assets, and an unapologetic, rigid stoicism. He's calling for nothing less than an absolute exodus of men from mainstream society.
And we must reiterate to you, our listeners, while we have explored these concepts in deep, granular detail,
Tracing the logic from the evolutionary biology of the workplace to the economics of a grid-down scenario.
we remain impartial observers. We have outlined the architecture of this ideology, but we are not endorsing the structure.
We laid out the blueprint, and it is up to you to decide what to do with it. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, lingering, provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
Something not explicitly written in Riker's text, but that feels like the inevitable next chapter if his ideas actually take root.
Okay.
Think about this. If this specific demographic of men successfully executes Riker's vision, if they pull their capital out of the banks, pull their labor out of the corporations, pull their participation out of marriage, and form these underground, crypto-funded, heavily armed neo-tribalist survival pods,
Yeah.
what happens when those parallel societies inevitably grow large enough to collide with the mainstream institutions they abandoned? Does it lead to a quiet, invisible Cold War of attrition? Or does it lead to the total explosive fracture of the social contract?
That is the explosive question pulsing beneath the surface of every page in this book.
It absolutely is. If you found this breakdown of the ideology fascinating, and you want to read the source material for yourself to see exactly how Conrad Riker constructs these arguments, check out Understanding the Apocalypse.
It is available right now on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books.
And be sure to follow the author at Conrad N. Riker on Substack.
Thank you for joining us as we navigated the muddy waters of a truly controversial text.
And please make sure to like and subscribe to the Deep Dive so you never miss our explorations of the most provocative, challenging sources out there. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.